The SEAL commander's smirk revealed everything he was thinking, just another desk worker trying to play soldier. However, when an enemy attack trapped his highly trained team in an impossible situation, and their expensive preparation couldn't rescue them, Lucy King performed an action that forced every soldier on that ridge to reconsider everything they believed about combat. She retrieved a weapon they hadn't known she carried, entered a deadly zone by herself, and accurately fired at 5 enemies in just 3 seconds. The commander's precise words, spoken quietly through clenched teeth as he observed her performance, captured his disbelief. No woman possessed that level of marksmanship. His assessment was accurate in one sense, no ordinary woman did. That's because Lucy King was far from ordinary, and the events that followed would compel America's most lethal warriors to accept a reality they had always resisted. Often the most formidable individual present is the one everyone dismissed. The transport aircraft rattled through rough air above the mountain range, its interior filled with soldiers who could rest through nearly anything except the presence of Lucy King. She remained completely motionless in her canvas seat with open eyes, observing the shifting shadows as the plane bounced and swayed. At 28 years old, she had a lean frame and dark hair secured in a standard bun that gave her face a stern appearance. Her uniform matched everyone else's, including identical body armor and the same professionally bored expression, but her gray eyes, resembling winter storms, followed every movement in the cargo area with a focus suggesting she was identifying dangers that hadn't yet materialized. Sitting opposite her, Chief Petty Officer Marcus Reeves met her stare and quickly looked away first. This pattern had become common since she joined their transport mission. The SEALs struggled to understand the woman from Joint Special Operations Command who had attached herself to their assignment like an unwanted attachment. Her official record indicated she was an intelligence analyst, yet her demeanor suggested something completely different. The loadmaster announced 30 minutes until deployment over the engine's roar. The SEALs began stirring, inspecting their weapons with the relaxed proficiency that comes from repeating the same procedure countless times. Lucy stayed motionless apart from her hands, which moved through her equipment with systematic precision. She checked her sidearm, ammunition magazines, medical supplies, and communications gear, ensuring everything occupied its proper position and remained accessible without conscious thought. Lieutenant Commander Jack Hawthorne navigated down the cargo area, gripping overhead straps for stability as the aircraft lurched. He embodied everything one might expect from a SEAL officer: tall stature, broad shoulders, square jaw, and the type of self-assurance that stems from never experiencing genuine failure in matters of importance. He halted before Lucy, looking down with an expression that fell somewhere between unfriendly and unwelcoming. He addressed her directly, his voice raised over the engines, making his expectations crystal clear. This was a direct assault mission where she would remain with the command group, observe the action, document what occurred, and refrain from engaging unless they faced complete destruction with absolutely no alternatives. She confirmed her understanding clearly. He emphasized his point again, explaining that his 12 operators had trained together for months and didn't require heroic gestures from intelligence personnel. She acknowledged this once more. Hawthorne waited as though expecting further comment, some protest or justification. When she simply maintained her calm stare, he made a sound of acknowledgement and continued on. Behind her, she detected Petty Officer Second Class Danny Torres quietly wagering $20 with his partner that she would panic the moment gunfire erupted. His companion declined the bet, noting that civilians always did. Lucy mentally recorded their voices, memorizing their tones, speech patterns, and underlying beliefs. Intelligence work had taught her that people disclosed more through casual remarks than formal presentations, and presently these soldiers were revealing precisely what she had anticipated. They perceived her as a burden wrapped in administrative complications. The aircraft's loadmaster initiated the final pre-landing procedures. Lucy closed her eyes and conducted her personal ritual, one that nobody else aboard would comprehend. She didn't offer prayers or visualize achievement. She simply recognized what she was approaching and accepted it with the detached analysis of someone who had learned that emotions were unnecessary weight one couldn't afford. The rear ramp descended and Afghanistan's morning air flooded in, arid, frigid, carrying the taste of dust and fuel. The SEALs departed with rehearsed efficiency, boots striking the hard ground in a tactical arrangement that had been practiced until it became automatic. Lucy followed, maintaining her designated position within the command element, positioned near enough to witness events but distant enough to avoid interfering with the actual operators. However, Lucy King had never been merely an observer, and before this day concluded, everyone would recognize that fact. The target compound occupied the valley like a scar on the landscape, encircled by terraced slopes that had sustained farming for countless generations.
Prepare for extraction.
The early light painted everything in gray and purple tones, giving the mud brick structures an appearance from an old photograph. Intelligence reports indicated the objective, a high-priority Taliban leader, was present with his security personnel. Intelligence suggested 6 to 8 combatants with basic weapons and limited capabilities. Lucy understood from harsh experience that intelligence frequently proved too optimistic. The SEALs advanced through their approach with flawless precision. Lucy remained with Hawthorne and the communications specialist, observing as the assault team closed on the structure. She could observe Chief Reeves moving at point position, scanning the terrain for explosive devices, checking angles with his weapon moving in smooth, controlled arcs.
Prepare for extraction.
These soldiers were experts, representing America's finest. Yet something felt wrong. Lucy sensed it before she could explain it, that creeping feeling between her shoulder blades that combat veterans learn to heed. The compound exhibited too much silence. No canine sounds, no roosters, no indications of life stirring with daybreak. Only silence bearing down with weight. She quietly informed Hawthorne that something seemed off. He glanced at her with irritation, suggesting the occupants were sleeping since they had arrived before Reveille, which was the entire strategy. She noted the absence of dogs in rural Afghanistan. He dismissed this, suggesting perhaps they had consumed them, and attempted to redirect her attention when the first detonation shattered the dawn quiet like breaking glass. The explosion didn't originate from within the compound but behind it, a massive buried device timed to detonate after the assault element passed but while the support team remained in the kill zone. Lucy felt the blast wave strike her chest as a pillar of flame and smoke burst from the hillside. Soldiers were injured and screaming. The radio erupted with desperate requests for medical assistance, status updates, and explanations for the disaster. Then the shooting commenced, not from the compound but from the terraced hillsides, from positions that had been prepared and reinforced into fighting emplacements by someone who fully understood how American Special Operations Forces execute raids. Muzzle flashes sparkled like hostile stars as automatic gunfire swept the valley floor. The ambush demonstrated perfection. The SEALs had entered a trap designed specifically for them, and now they were trapped in a kill zone with casualties and no protection. Hawthorne shouted into his radio, attempting to coordinate a reaction and rally his dispersed team. Lucy observed with cold analysis as bullets kicked up dust near their location. She tallied muzzle flashes, calculated distances, and identified the enemy's likely command position based on which locations fired in synchronized patterns. Her hand moved instinctively toward her sidearm, then halted. Not yet, not unless absolutely required. A SEAL collapsed 10 meters to her left, gripping his leg where a round had penetrated the gap in his armor. Another dragged him toward a short wall while rounds snapped past their heads with sounds resembling angry insects. The firebase was meant to provide covering fire. Where was that support? The radio operator reported that Outpost Delta was experiencing heavy attack and couldn't provide assistance, his voice strained with tension. Naturally they couldn't help. This wasn't an opportunistic attack but a coordinated assault hitting multiple locations simultaneously, designed to isolate and eliminate an American Special Operations element, and it was succeeding. Lucy activated her own radio, speaking on the command channel with an eerie calmness. She requested immediate air support and prepared to transmit coordinates, reporting multiple enemy fighting positions that were fortified, estimating 30 to 40 combatants in prepared defenses. The response informed her that air assets were 20 minutes away and asked if they could maintain their position. Lucy assessed the chaos developing around her, watching the SEALs fighting desperately against an adversary holding every advantage. 20 minutes might as well be 20 hours. She responded negatively, stating they required support immediately. The voice acknowledged and told her to stand by. Standing by wasn't viable. Another SEAL went down, this time remaining motionless. The medic attempting to reach him faced fire that forced him back to cover. Lucy could now identify the enemy commander, or at least his probable location, based on which position was directing the other's fire. A terraced position midway up the hillside with perfect angles into the valley, protected against counter-battery fire. Chief Reeves returned to the command element, breathing heavily with a cut above his eye streaming blood down his face. He urgently told Hawthorne they were being devastated and needed to relocate to find cover or something. Hawthorne responded sharply that no cover existed, everything was a kill zone and the enemy had planned this flawlessly. Torres demanded to know if they were simply going to die there, his earlier confidence replaced by fear's sharp edge. Lucy stood up, simply rose calmly as though getting up from a church seat. Every SEAL stared at her as though she had lost her mind. Standing during a firefight was suicidal, everyone understood that. Everyone except Lucy King, who was already advancing toward a low earthen mound that offered marginal protection and a clear line of sight to enemy positions. Hawthorne bellowed for her to get down. She disregarded him. Her hand reached to the small of her back beneath her vest and extracted a weapon that definitely wasn't standard issue for intelligence analysts. The rifle was compact and black, custom modified in ways indicating very specific requirements. A suppressor suggested someone wanted to operate quietly, while optics costing more than most vehicles completed the package. She deployed the bipod with one fluid motion and assumed a prone position behind the mound, cheek against the stock, breathing already regulated. Through her optic, the enemy positions resolved with perfect clarity. She could observe muzzle flashes, detect movement behind stone fortifications, and see heat waves rising from barrels that had been firing excessively. Reeves began questioning what was happening. Lucy's first shot was nearly inaudible, just a suppressed crack barely detectable over the continuing firefight. On the hillside, a figure operating a machine gun suddenly fell backward, his weapon going silent. The other SEALs didn't even register what had occurred until Lucy was already transitioning to her second target. The rifle cracked again and another combatant dropped. This one had been directing fire and coordinating the ambush from a sheltered position. He had believed himself invisible and safe behind his stone barrier. He had been mistaken. Lucy processed targets with mechanical efficiency. Each shot was deliberate, calculated, and conclusive. She wasn't attempting to suppress the enemy or force them to take cover. She was systematically eliminating them from the battlefield one precise shot at a time, the type of marksmanship that appeared effortless but demanded years of preparation, complete understanding of ballistics, and the kind of cold composure that most individuals never develop. The SEALs watched in shocked silence as their intelligence analyst transformed into something entirely different. Her shots were connecting with targets at ranges that should have been impossible with such a compact weapon. She was accounting for wind, elevation, even the increasing heat of the day with adjustments so subtle they resembled instinct. A rocket-propelled grenade team was positioning to fire into the trapped Americans. Lucy placed a round through the gunner's chest at 400 meters, immediately transitioning to the loader before he could recover the weapon. Both individuals collapsed within 2 seconds of each other, and the RPG tumbled down the hillside unused. Torres whispered in astonishment, questioning who this woman was. Hawthorne was observing through his optic, tracking Lucy's shots, witnessing the enemy position collapse under fire from someone who wasn't supposed to be armed, much less employing a weapon with this degree of expertise. He asked what she was. She didn't respond. Her world had contracted to the scope image, to the gentle trigger pressure, to the rhythm of controlled respiration and precise trigger manipulation. The enemy commander, or whom she had identified as the commander, was attempting to relocate. She could observe him moving between terraces, believing he was concealed by the terrain. He was incorrect about that as well. The shot presented difficulty, a moving target partially obscured at a distance where most marksmen would struggle hitting stationary paper. Lucy led him by precisely the correct amount, squeezed when everything aligned perfectly, and observed through her optic as the figure collapsed mid-stride. The effect on the remaining combatants was immediate. Without central coordination, their disciplined fire became sporadic and uncoordinated. Individual positions began making decisions based on survival rather than tactics, and survival meant withdrawing, escaping from the invisible death that was locating them regardless of where they hid. Lucy fired 3 additional times in rapid succession, each shot finding a target who believed they were safely retreating. The lesson was clear: there was no safe retreat, not from her. Reeves stated with disbelief in his voice that the enemy was breaking, that she was breaking them by herself. The firefight didn't conclude with dramatic finality but simply ceased. The enemy positions fell quiet one by one, either because their occupants were deceased or because they had fled into the hills. The valley filled with an almost oppressive silence broken only by the sounds of injured men and the crackling of flames from destroyed equipment. Lucy secured her weapon and stood, displaying no visible emotion, no satisfaction, no relief, no post-adrenaline tremors. She simply stood there with her weapon held ready, scanning for threats that no longer existed. Hawthorne approached slowly, like someone approaching a dangerous animal of uncertain temperament. He addressed her, his voice altered now without dismissal or condescension, containing something closer to awe mixed with apprehension. He demanded to know what that was. She looked at him with those gray eyes and stated that was her keeping his team alive.
Roger that.
He responded that intelligence analysts don't shoot like that nobody shoots like that. She clarified she wasn't really an intelligence analyst. He expressed his lack of surprise and asked what she truly was. Lucy ejected her magazine, inspected the chamber, then reloaded with movements indicating thousands of repetitions. She explained she was the person they deploy when intelligence isn't sufficient, when they need someone who can assess a situation and resolve it, the person they send when they need targets eliminated and nobody can know who performed the elimination. The silence that followed carried heavy implications. Reeves interrupted it, his voice carrying across the valley, noting they had wounded requiring immediate evacuation and needed to secure the area before someone higher in the command structure decided to strike them with mortars. Hawthorne continued staring at Lucy, asking how many she had eliminated. She responded 17 confirmed, possibly 3 more she wasn't certain about. He repeated the number as though testing the word, asking over how many minutes. She questioned whether it mattered. He stated it did matter because he had been performing this work for 12 years and had never witnessed anyone shoot as she just had.
Target down, reloading.
The question he was asking himself was whether she represented an asset or a threat. Lucy slung her rifle across her chest and stated that right now she was the reason his soldiers were returning home alive, and that was all that should matter. She departed, heading toward where the medic was treating wounded SEALs, leaving Hawthorne standing alone with thoughts he would probably never fully process. Behind him, Torres and his partner were conducting a quiet conversation, both confirming they had witnessed what happened, though they found it unbelievable, and questioning who she was. The conclusion was that she was someone far above their authority level. The sun had risen higher, eliminating the morning chill and painting the valley in harsh illumination that revealed every detail of the firefight. Spent cartridge casings littered the ground and blood stained the dust. In the middle of it all, Lucy King moved among the wounded with calm efficiency, assisting the medic in stabilizing soldiers for evacuation.
Perimeter secure, no
She
contact.
didn't resemble a cold-blooded killer who had just eliminated 17 enemy combatants with clinical precision. She appeared exactly as her file claimed, an intelligence analyst performing her duties. However, everyone who had witnessed the events in this valley now understood a simple truth. Files contained falsehoods, appearances, deceived, and the most dangerous individuals were always the ones you never anticipated. The helicopter's rotors pounded the air into submission as it landed in a swirl of dust and debris.
Down, reloading.
The wounded boarded first, secured in litters or walking with help depending on their injuries. The remainder of the SEAL element followed, moving with the careful efficiency of soldiers who had just survived something they hadn't expected to survive. Lucy was the final one to board. She stood at the landing zone's edge with weapons slung across her chest, scanning the ridge lines one last time, searching for threats that might still emerge, looking for survivors who might seek revenge, looking because that's what you did when you were the person responsible for killing 17 individuals before breakfast. Hawthorne grasped her arm as she reached the helicopter's ramp, not roughly but firmly enough to halt her forward movement. He stated they needed to discuss matters upon return, requesting a full debriefing.
Copy. I've got your back.
She offered to provide a written report. He clarified he didn't want a written report but wanted to know who she actually worked for and what she had been doing on his operation. Lucy gently freed her arm and stated she worked for the same nation he did and was performing her duties, which was all he needed to know. He expressed his dissatisfaction with that response. She stated that was all he would know, emphasizing his rank without making it sound like mockery, though it came close. She suggested they transport the wounded to medical care before continuing this discussion. The return flight to the forward operating base required 40 minutes. Lucy sat alone near the crew chief's position, methodically cleaning her rifle while the SEALs clustered together, processing what they had witnessed. Some were treating wounded, some were staring into space with the vacant gaze of soldiers replaying combat mentally. A few were stealing glances at Lucy, attempting to reconcile the quiet woman disassembling her weapon with the lethal efficiency they had witnessed in the valley. Chief Reeves finally separated from his team and occupied the seat beside her. He remained silent for an extended moment, simply observing her hands move through the cleaning ritual, oilcloth removing carbon from the bolt, or snake running through the barrel, every movement precise and economical. He finally spoke, mentioning his daughter wanted to join the military, specifically the Marine Corps, and that he had been attempting to dissuade her, telling her it was no environment for women, that she would never receive the respect she deserved, that the men would never truly accept her. Lucy continued cleaning without looking up, telling him he should stop. He asked what he should stop. She stated he should stop lying to his daughter, because that's what he had been doing, lying, telling her she couldn't when he should have been helping her prepare for the fact that she absolutely could. Reeves fell quiet, then asked how long she had been doing this, the actual work rather than the analyst cover. She responded 8 years. He began asking how many but trailed off, unable to complete the question. Lucy completed it for him, asking if he meant how many she had killed. She stated enough that she stopped counting but not so many that she stopped remembering, each one, every face, every shot, every decision. She explained you carry them with you, that's the price. He noted she was so young. She responded she was old enough and finally looked at him. Regarding his daughter, if she wanted to serve, he should help her, train her, prepare her, not lie and tell her she couldn't do something simply because it was difficult. Because the truth was that some women could perform this work better than any man. They had to work harder to prove it and be twice as competent to receive half the recognition, but they could do it. He observed that the shooting he witnessed that day wasn't merely training but something else. She explained that's what happens when you take someone with the proper aptitude and provide them unlimited ammunition, unlimited training time, and instructors who care about nothing except making you the best possible version of yourself. She reassembled her rifle with swift practice movements, adding that's what happens when you stop thinking of warfare as exclusively masculine work and start thinking of it as a professional skill that anyone with the appropriate attributes can master. The helicopter banked, approaching the landing zone. Through the open ramp, Lucy could observe the base spreading across the valley floor, rows of tents and temporary structures, vehicles arranged in orderly lines, the infrastructure of modern warfare consisting of logistics, planning, and careful preparation, which made this morning's events even more troubling. Someone had known precisely where the SEALs would be and exactly how they would approach. Someone had prepared a perfect trap, and someone would want to understand how Lucy King had dismantled that trap. The landing was controlled chaos with medical personnel rushing toward the wounded and officers appearing to collect reports. The base commander wanted immediate briefings. Lucy slipped away in the confusion, heading toward the intelligence section's workspace with her rifle broken down and secured in its case. She had written such reports previously and knew how this would proceed. She had traveled perhaps 50 meters when a voice stopped her cold, addressing her as Captain King, not Lucy, not simply King, but Captain King with full rank.
Target down, reloading.
She turned to find a man in civilian attire standing beside a black SUV that clearly didn't belong on a forward operating base. He appeared in his 50s, fit in the manner suggesting he had once been operational and hadn't allowed himself to deteriorate completely.
Roger that.
His eyes were hard and knowing. She addressed him neutrally as Mr. Harrison. He instructed her to walk with him. It wasn't a request. She fell into step beside him as they moved away from the main base activities toward a corner where shipping containers had been stacked to create privacy. When they were isolated, Harrison turned to face her, stating he had received 16 separate intelligence sources telling him that operation would be a clean elimination with the target in place, minimal security, and a textbook raid, yet instead it transformed into the kind of disaster that generates congressional hearings. She noted the intelligence had been compromised. He acknowledged this sarcastically, noting the question was how and by whom, but that wasn't why he was present. He studied her with those hard eyes, explaining he was there because she had violated her cover. She was supposed to observe, document, and provide real-time intelligence updates, not engage in direct action resulting in 17 enemy casualties attributed to a single shooter, according to the tablet he retrieved from his jacket. Lucy stood perfectly still, asking if he would have preferred those 17 casualties to be American instead. He stated he would have preferred she follow orders. He emphasized that her assignment was to maintain her cover as an analyst while gathering intelligence on SEAL team operational protocols, which was why they had inserted her in what she was supposed to accomplish. She countered that her job was to keep Americans alive, which was what she had always been told. He stated firmly that her job was what he told her it was, reminding her she wasn't a SEAL, wasn't a Ranger, wasn't even officially military anymore. She was an asset, a tool they used when conventional options wouldn't work, and tools that acted independently tended to get locked away. She asked if he was threatening her. He clarified he was reminding her there were consequences for deviating from the script. The operation she was observing had now been completely compromised. Every soldier on that team knew there was something unusual about her. They would discuss it, speculate, and eventually someone would begin asking the kind of questions leading to answers they didn't want discovered.
Copy. Prepare for
Lucy shifted her weight slightly, a movement so subtle most people wouldn't have noticed, but Harrison noticed. He was trained to notice, and he took half a step backward, suddenly aware he was conducting this conversation with someone who had killed 17 individuals before lunch without breaking a sweat. She asked what happens now. He stated now she would write her report, explaining that enemy positions were already compromised by air strikes before arrival, that she provided intelligence support enabling the SEALs to effectively engage targets, explaining everything except the part where she personally killed half the enemy force. He asked if he wanted her to lie. He stated he wanted her to maintain operational security, noting there was a difference. Lucy considered this. She had known this conversation was inevitable the moment she had picked up her rifle. Every operation had its consequences, every decision its price. She asked what would happen if she refused. He stated she would find herself reassigned to a desk in a basement in Virginia analyzing satellite photographs of empty desert, asking if that's what she wanted, to be shelved while other people performed the actual work. He had leverage and they both understood it. Lucy King was many things, but she wasn't someone who could sit behind a desk while Americans died in the field. That was her vulnerability, and Harrison knew precisely how to exploit it. She stated she would write the report. He acknowledged this was good, adding that next time she was inserted into an operation, she should remember what she was there for: observation, analysis, support, not heroics. He departed, leaving Lucy standing alone among the shipping containers. Above her, the Afghan sun beat down with merciless intensity. In the distance, she could hear the sounds of the base conducting its business, helicopters landing and departing, vehicles moving, the background noise of war. She looked down at her hands, which were steady without tremor, shake, or visible aftermath of what she had done.
Copy. I've got you back.
However, inside where nobody else could observe, Lucy King was making calculations about loyalty and duty, about following orders and doing what was right, about the distinction between being a tool and being a person.
Copy. Prepare for extraction.
She was making a decision that would define everything that came next. 3 days later, Lucy sat in a briefing room with Commander Hawthorne, Chief Reeves, and 2 officers from JSOC she didn't recognize. The walls were blank concrete with no windows, the type of room where secrets were shared and consequences were decided. Hawthorne initiated the meeting, noting the official report stated the enemy positions were already degraded by preparatory fires before their ground element arrived, that Captain King provided valuable real-time intelligence enabling effective targeting, and that the operation, while resulting in casualties, was ultimately successful. He paused, looking directly at Lucy, stating they all knew that was false and they all knew what really happened. He was going to ask her one more time who she really worked for. Lucy had spent 3 days deciding how to answer this question. She had written the report Harrison wanted, filed the paperwork, and done everything required to maintain her cover and preserve operational security. However, sitting in this room looking at soldiers who had almost died because intelligence had failed them, she made a different choice. She stated she worked for an organization that didn't officially exist, explaining they identified situations where conventional military responses were either impossible or inadvisable and inserted assets like her to resolve those situations through direct action while maintaining plausible deniability for the United States government. One of the JSOC officers stated flatly that meant assassins. She corrected him, saying problem solvers, explaining the targets were always verified, always legitimate threats to American lives or interests, but sometimes those threats were in locations where they couldn't officially operate, sometimes they were protected by diplomatic immunity or political considerations, and sometimes they were simply too dangerous to approach through normal channels. Reeves leaned forward, asking what she was: a ghost, a myth, one of those operators everyone hears about but nobody's supposed to believe exists. She stated she was someone who had been given very specific training and very specific authorities to perform a very specific job, which was keeping Americans alive when all the normal rules made that impossible. Hawthorne was processing this, his expression cycling through disbelief, anger, and finally a kind of resigned acceptance. Regarding the Valley ambush, he noted it was perfect because someone in the Afghan security forces tipped off the Taliban. They knew the SEALs were coming, knew their approach routes, knew their tactics, and it was supposed to be a massacre. Instead, it transformed into a lesson about underestimating the wrong person. He acknowledged she saved their lives. She stated she did her job. He disagreed, shaking his head and stating she went way beyond her job, risking exposure, risking her cover, risking whatever mission she was really conducting to save a group of SEALs who had spent the entire flight treating her as though she didn't belong, and he asked why. Lucy was quiet for an extended moment, then stated it was because that's what they do. They keep Americans alive even when those Americans don't know they exist, even when they wouldn't approve of their methods if they did know. They stand in the shadows and perform the ugly work so that people like him can perform the heroic work in the light. That's the agreement they made, the burden they carry. The room fell silent. Finally, one of the JSOC officers spoke, stating this conversation never happened and this briefing never occurred. As far as official records were concerned, Captain King provided intelligence support and that was all. He asked if everyone was clear. Everyone nodded. He stated good, because if word got out that they had assets operating outside normal chains of command, conducting lethal operations on American authority but without official oversight, there would be investigations, congressional hearings, and criminal charges, and everyone in this room would be caught in that net. They filed out one by one. Hawthorne lingered, waiting until it was just him and Lucy. He stated that for what it was worth, he had been wrong about her, completely, totally wrong. She noted most people were. He asked if it was lonely, being that person, being someone nobody's supposed to know about. Lucy considered the question, stating sometimes it was, but then she thought about the SEALs who returned home to their families because she was there, about the attacks that never happened because someone like her was in the right place at the right time, and she remembered why she did this. He asked if he would see her again. She stated probably not, explaining people like her don't remain in one place. They move, adapt, disappear, and that's how they stay effective. She stood, gathering her minimal equipment. Hawthorne watched her prepare to leave, this woman who had saved his team and was disappearing into mythology before his eyes. He addressed her one last time, thanking her for his soldiers, for keeping them alive. She stated he was welcome, then asked him to do her a favor. He asked what that was. She told him to stop underestimating people based on their appearance or what their files stated, because the most dangerous people were always the ones you never saw coming, and to remember that because he might live long enough to make admiral. She departed, leaving Hawthorne standing alone in the empty briefing room. 6 months later, in a different country conducting a different operation, Lucy King sat in an observation post observing a target house through high-powered optics. The mission was straightforward: identify, confirm, eliminate, the type of work that never made the news, never generated medals, never appeared in official records. Her spotter, a young operator on his second deployment, whispered nervously, asking if she really did this, just sat there waiting for someone to provide her a shot, then took it, then disappeared. She confirmed that was the job. He asked if it didn't bother her, killing people from distance without them even knowing. Lucy adjusted her scope fractionally, compensating for a wind shift her spotter hadn't even detected yet. She stated it used to bother her, then she stopped thinking about it as killing people and started thinking about it as solving problems. That man in that house was planning an attack that would kill hundreds, maybe thousands. He was protected by his government, by his security detail, by international law.
I've got your back.
Conventional options had been exhausted, so she was there. Tomorrow, hundreds of people who didn't even know she existed would wake up alive because of what she did tonight. That's how she lived with it. The target appeared in a window. Lucy's finger moved to the trigger and she told her spotter to stand by. He confirmed he was standing by. The shot was perfect, clean, and final. The target dropped and Lucy was already disassembling her weapon, preparing to disappear into the night. Another problem solved, another threat eliminated, another day of being the person nobody was supposed to know about, performing the job nobody was supposed to acknowledge existed. The wolf doesn't announce itself to the sheep, and America's deadliest wolves wore faces nobody would ever remember, worked jobs nobody would ever acknowledge, and carried burdens nobody would ever understand. Lucy King was one of those wolves, and the world was safer because of it, even though the world would never know her name.